Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Layman's Law School, where three Southern gentlemen lawyers sit around and discuss the legal issues of the day, hopefully in layman's terms, and give you a little bit of a different perspective. And, you know, before I get into today's topic, which of course is going to be Karen Reid again, based on what people are interested in, I want to inform people that we have day jobs, that we are actually practicing attorneys, and this is an excuse for us to get together and have some drinks and speak about things that we're interested in. And so if you're looking for detailed commentary on every little piece of evidence in every case, you can go ahead and move along. If you want to maybe laugh a little bit, maybe learn something about the theory of the law that goes behind these cases, you're in the right place.
And we're talking about things that have happened, not that are happening.
That's
so,
right. Yeah.
We're not. It's not going to be the day of. We're not live.
No.
But we certainly like to discuss and kind of go through what has happened and give our opinion on it.
Well, and like Chace said, not only do we have day jobs, but some of us have family and children, and unlike Chace with no children, we don't have the time nor necessarily the ferocious appetite to watch every bit of testimony that many of our viewers do. I just don't have the time to do it. But I like the things that Chace brings up and says, hey, take a look at this. Take a look at this. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so I recently saw a little post, and it says being 40 and not having any kids, and being 30 and not having kids, and it was just, Will Ferrell? He says, I'm just living the dream. Waking up on a Saturday with nothing else to do, nobody asking me for anything.
I love it.
So, no, I really do enjoy
this.
I do
have multiple children. That's how I deal with it.
All right. Slowly
Happy
poison
Friday.
yourself.
Self-medication. Yeah.
Cheers.
Happy
Friday.
Cheers. Enjoyed it. Another hectic, good week.
That's right.
With changes, moving and shaking. So,
and congratulations to Prosecutor Lally for getting his case done with today. Just about. Well,
right
at least
word.
His case in chief.
Yeah.
Today
his case might have been done before it started, but he did get to the end of his case in chief, and I bet he is relieved to be able to sit down and just do a little bit of cross-examination and pick apart some of the things that maybe some of the defense witnesses might say.
Yeah, and we're going to talk some about that. Today is June 21st. Okay, we had some other things to do today, so we could not watch the last part of today's testimony, and we stopped watching, I stopped watching and taking notes after the defense moved the prosecution defense moved to dismiss the case. I will explain some of that. I don't know what the judge ruled.
Well,
I know what the judge ruled.
You know what the judge ruled.
Yeah.
I mean, and you also know why they have to present that. The defense. But that's just kind of formality.
Yeah, but guys, all right. So typically, when you do this, all right, we talk about we talked about the open earlier, okay, and in the opening, that's where you make your promises. This is what I'm going to show you. This is what the facts of the case are going to be. And Lally made a lot of promises. And so today we're going to talk about some of the things he kept and some of the things he didn't really keep.
And when you don't keep them, it's really, really harmful.
Yeah. It goes against two different things. Most people know the number one, which it goes against the evidence that you have. But the big thing that it goes against is your credibility. And you have to be seen, if you are a trial lawyer, you have to be seen as the person that is in charge and already knows the answers. Yeah. And as soon as the jury or fact finder, sometimes the judge, believes that you do not, that case is dead.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Lally here in this case, the poor credibility of some of the witnesses that testified.
Absolutely.
The highlight being Trooper Proctor and probably Officer Paul, the accident reconstructionist.
And like I said, Chace, that's a good point. I mean, we deal with it in our personal injury cases, our premise liability cases. All that stuff is that it's not a lie. I'm not saying that, but we have clients say things incorrectly. They're not trying to lie. They're saying things and they're misinformed, and that would just destroy the case. And people will say, oh, that guy's not a very good lawyer. That girl's not a very good lawyer. You can't help or you can't fix what the client says. All you can do is prepare them, get them to tell the truth, and sometimes they say it in a way that you can't fix. And I think that to take a little bit of blame off the
Sure.
prosecution,
Yeah.
they were not given a very good witness set as far as
and
what they've
sometimes
done.
I don't know whether or not our clients intentionally misled, but sometimes I sit down with clients and they feel very credible to me, and
Yep.
I ask them questions. Do you have any prior accidents, prior injuries of this nature, everything? And then the case might go on for 2 years, and then we're sitting in we've done a deposition prep where I've asked them all these questions again. Then we're sitting in a deposition, and the other side, the defense lawyers on a civil case, are bringing up documents and third-party production documents that are like, well, what about this accident? What about when you went to the ER and had back pain then? And I'm like, did you just forget about this stuff?
And that's
but it harms the credibility.
It does.
For good, whether or not they were intentionally doing it or just didn't think about it, it just harms their credibility. It harms their case. And in this case, when you have numerous witnesses that show some credibility issues and a real lack of trustworthiness, the jury is seeing the same thing.
But real quick, a PSA on Chace. I'm sorry to cut you off. PSA real quick on people that say about these attorneys are filing crazy lawsuits, blah blah blah. A lot of times that's true, but every time that is true, we don't know until we get the evidence. And so there's cases that I've filed, Shawn, you too,
Sure.
Chace, you too, that we find out our client is lying to us. And then we dismiss the case.
Yeah.
But so look through the facts before you start throwing daggers at the attorneys sometimes.
Yeah, and so let's get back to talking about Lally. I remember one of the things we talked about was his affect in his opening, right? Somebody not super thrilled to be there. Somebody that looked like that they were doing a version of the opening that would be the equivalent of a factory worker.
Sure.
Coming in
It
here,
almost looked like
stamping out,
to me it had of a mock trialish kind of feel, in that he was kind of going through the motions, and that he was just he didn't believe in his own case. That's how it felt.
So I
That's
think he knew all this evidence that was going to come out was going to hurt his clients, and he was in the. And honestly, I applaud him for this. Have you noticed he's been the only prosecutor?
Yep, I have.
Why
Absolutely.
do you think that
Really?
is? Yeah,
'Cause
he's the one. Usually,
got
what
no
happens
help.
here is
Yep.
that other attorneys jump in and they cover certain portions of a cross or a direct or opening, something like that, closing, so that you can focus more on your part of it and do a more thorough
It's like
job.
just-
But he was aware
Yep.
at what was going to come out at trial and how bad it was going to be associated with that. So.
He's taking the bullets.
He's taking that on the chin for that. So for everybody out there that is giving him kind of a hard time, know that he's got two super high-powered, super experienced lawyers that have lawyers helping them.
Yeah,
sure.
Other lawyers that
just
are
to
doing
give
so.
an example, like if we have a trial, you may be focused on damages, and Shawn's on liability, and I'll focus on cross
Opening
on certain things. So it's all chopped up where you can have a lot more time on a specific thing. And if you don't do that, as we've seen, especially in a big case with lots of witnesses, lots of facts, a case like this where the facts are everywhere, you're going to miss things. And you can't keep track of what the witness is saying and things you're supposed to say if you don't have help.
Sure.
And he's on an island, man. That's how I viewed it.
Yeah, and unfortunately for him, what was supposed to be his star witness actually turned out to be the star witness for the defense, and that is Trooper Proctor. Trooper Proctor, I don't know, Shawn, if this is how police officers talk to one another, but it's very unusual. Yeah, it is very unusual for a police officer to have his personal text messages to his friends, family, maybe not supervisors, but subpoenaed in this fashion. But with the facts and circumstances of the case, with the fact that there was an allegation that there was a cover up here, that there was collusion between the police officers, and that his personal life is intermixed with his work.
Sure.
It
Well,
made
he
it
made
highly
the claim
relevant.
that it was not just he, but the entire police department made the claim that these people were just casual acquaintances, and so it's admissible just in that regard of let me show you that it's not true. They're not casual acquaintances.
They're talking about a little bit more than
Yeah.
I talk about with my casual
they're
acquaintances.
texting about balloon knots so that's
Yeah.
that's a little bit more
For-
than a casual acquaintance.
Right, and for him to be commenting, he's commenting to high school friends.
Yeah.
Not, he's commenting and talking to people that are associated with what should be somebody that he's actually investigating, the people that Alberts,
Sure.
the people that were there. He's
It's fine
communicating
to talk
with
to
them.
him, but he's talking to him about the case.
Yeah. Not only that, but it was explained. It basically offered to him that they wanted the Alberts or Jim McCabe. I can't remember which one it was. They wanted to get him a present for all the work he had done
Yeah.
on this, and he said, "Give it to my wife."
Yep.
I mean, the way that looks.
Right. That could be completely innocent to play
Completely,
devil's
yeah.
advocate, but
Right.
but it doesn't look good.
It
Yeah.
stinks.
Yeah, yeah, but there's been a whole lot of movies made about Boston and Boston cops
Yep.
and stuff like that, and I think that's going to play a role. And there's there is a stigma a little bit of attached to this, that organized crime has their hooks and has had their hooks at different times in that area, and so that's all going to kind of play into it, and it plays into confirmation bias, not only for the jury, right, but those text messages reveal with Trooper Proctor confirmation bias and how that affects him.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
within 24 hours, he's texting his high school buddies and stuff like that she's a whack job, and basically indicating through those text messages that she's the one that he's
After.
Well, Shawn, I think you're probably the best person to speak on this in our group. We've obviously all seen it, but you've lived it. When you have an investigation, you let the evidence take you where it takes you. And in this investigation, the decision was made up, and like Chace is saying, confirmation bias. They found the evidence to support what they already had made a conclusion in. Like, explain, like you've been in that situation where
Sure.
you may think one thing, but how do you kind of go about that as far as like, all right, I still got to follow the evidence?
I would say that you have to make sure that your investigation is comprehensive so that you try and close up loose ends of things that could later be reasonable doubt. So, to go to a scene of a death or what they're trying to call a murder, type thing, and to, not even interview the people that are inside the house, 100 feet away,
Right.
in the yard that this person is found dead in, is absolutely crazy. You do that, you
So
separate
I
the
guess
people.
like even if you knew for a fact, if you were with the person that was in the house and you knew for a fact they couldn't have done it, I would imagine you still would interview them to make sure you close that
Absolutely.
up, right?
Absolutely. So that it is a comprehensive thing to, what I always say, especially now that I'm do a lot of criminal defense attorney or had in the past, is that it's just as important to exonerate, the innocent as it is to convict, the guilty.
Sure.
So as a criminal investigator, you want to button up all those loose ends that may be used. Yeah, have a potential. So that, if even if that this person wasn't involved, but there's some type of evidence linking the person, or somebody says they think they're involved, when you go interview that person, at least, document, what the interview was. That way you have it, and later on you can refer back to it and say, well, no, I looked into that. Did you look at anybody else? Well, yeah, I looked at so-and-so because another person said that, they had some words in the past. So I went and interviewed him, figured out where he was. He wasn't anywhere in the vicinity. Couldn't have been him. There's just, anytime that you start off the premise of, I believe this person is guilty and I have to find evidence to prove it, you are going to subconsciously eliminate things that should pop out at you if you were looking at things with an open mind.
Right.
Yeah, and we're talking about we were kind of focused on Trooper Proctor there. Yeah, and he said some misogynistic locker room talk kind of things, not only to his friends but also his supervisors about Karen Reid. He was using words that if I use those words around my wife, she gets upset. I have never used that word towards her because I don't have any scars on my face, so you can tell, right?
I thought that was going in a different direction.
No,
I thought you were going to
no.
say, yeah.
She would have
Hot
dotted.
Tub Tuesdays.
Nah, she's a tough one. She would have dotted my eyes, split my lips, something. But yeah, the judge made him spell it out when he was asked
and
about
I thought that was,
or no,
I thought that was
to
important.
actually say it because he spelled it out.
She said,
C-U-N-T,
is this,
say it.
are
These
these your words?
Say it. Yeah.
And I thought that was a very important thing that
Absolutely.
the judge did because, it's one thing to sort of spell it, but to say it, that jury heard it. And whether that affected Proctor's ability to investigate, I don't know. I would guess probably yes because of the way it's laid out, but it really doesn't matter. When the jury hears that, there's a lot of ladies on that jury. I think there's more women than men actually, and I don't know of any woman who would take that lightly. And it just shows that you kind of already have this thought in your head that this person's already guilty, and not only that, you want her to be guilty. That's what that's how I view it. Is a kind of a hatred of against her, against women, all that, and it's just taints what you've done if you've done it correctly.
And it points to the idea of confirmation bias. So this is what you want to find, so you're going to ignore evidence that leads another direction.
Sure.
Overlook it, not follow up right away. And so it's like, why did Jenny McCabe go in the house and wake up these people? Why did they get rid of the dog?
Yeah.
Okay. Why did both Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, who was a love interest of Karen Reid as it came out, they had made out while they were both dating, while John and Karen were dating, right? And they came out through the text messages. Why did they destroy their phones and their SIM cards? Okay. Why did Brian Higgins go to his FBI buddy and have just the certain text messages taken off his phone, right, and saved, and not the whole entire cell phone? These are all things that create the kind of question that defense attorneys sit on, talk about. They rely on in every case to talk about that reason, about why did that happen.
The unknown monster is we've talked about this on the podcast before. The unknown monster is scarier than the known one. And so those text messages that were deleted and all these other things from these other officers may have been just fodder like Proctor's that are completely inappropriate. Don't get me wrong, but they may have not shown any kind of liability or cover up, anything like that. But when you destroy it, that gives the look of it. It just does.
I mean, that's what they always say, that it's the cover up that always is worse than the actual, what occurred itself. And even if it was just that you as
maybe they were embarrassed what they said.
As an officer thought that you would get professional discipline because of your comments to other people about this investigation, so you had that done. When I was a police officer, they taught us from the get-go to monitor your behavior on your phone with regards to everything, not even with about talking about cases, but just in your private conversations, because this was back in the day when digital cameras were there, but phones had just come out with cameras, so it was much easier. You go to a call, a woman's been beat up, you take your phone out, you snap 2 or 3 pictures of her on your personal cell phone, you email it to your records management system or whatever. Well, that kind of gives them the ability to subpoena your phone for because you're using it in that official capacity, and then they can go through there and find anything and find if you ever use the word CUNT, just
balloon
to
knot,
harm your credibility. I will say I'm guarantee you that neither one of those were, certainly not balloon knot or CUNT, I have ever used on my phone.
Well, and it goes to a point that we understand, okay, because of what we do, but most people don't ever really have to think about it, in that most people think of themselves as a thinking person or animal that feels, and that's not the case. What you are is a feeling animal that thinks, and what you feel drives you. And if I come in the room and I start using CUNT and all kinds of other words, I do reprehensible, horrible stuff, that don't have anything to do with my investigation.
We feel first, and then
you're like, I don't like this guy.
Yep.
This guy's got low character.
Yep.
This guy is not somebody I would trust. Okay, and then he might be stating facts.
It's a confirmation bias for the other direction.
Yeah.
You know, he being Proctor is using confirmation bias on the evidence. Well, the jury's going to do the same thing. They're going to go, I don't like this guy, and we're going to find reasons to make it where what he says is definitely not true.
Yeah.
I mean, that's human nature.
Yeah, and so that was one of, I think, the nail in the coffin when the governor of Massachusetts comes out and basically says that it's embarrassing, that it's a dark day for Boston, and she's commenting specifically on your testimony. That's a bad day in court.
Yeah,
especially as a state police officer.
As a state employee. I mean,
essentially the governor is your ultimate boss,
right?
Yeah, and so in addition to that, I think one of the biggest problems, because I was personally looking for this, right? I was looking for something from the prosecution that showed how this happened.
That's the first thing I asked you, you know, because obviously I haven't watched it like you have. I've gotten clips and things of that. And you told me that the prosecution rested, and I said, okay, what expert did they have that said that these injuries were consistent with the theory of the case of, you know, Karen Reid running him over in a vehicle, and what Chace told me
was
not acceptable to me for a conviction of murder.
I said it in our last time we talked about it. We're halfway through the prosecution's case at that point, and I still believe it's true. They got sidetracked early. The prosecution got sidetracked early, and the prosecution was doing nothing. They switched roles. All they were doing is fighting off the defendant and the defense attorneys. But this is your case in chief. You shouldn't be fighting off anything. You should be laying the groundwork and laying what happened out. And the entire time it just felt like a boxer that was trying to protect himself as the prosecution. Yeah. There was no...
He was doing great defensive work.
Yeah,
it's like, no, you're supposed to be punching.
But you didn't ever land the shot.
Well, and it really makes no sense because you got to think about who has the resources here.
Yeah.
And in almost every criminal case, it is the state of Massachusetts, the district attorney's office. If they wanted to, they could go out and hire any expert witness that they wanted to, whether they're a biomechanical expert, an accident reconstructionist, without having to rely on simply the state trooper who, took a class one time that qualified him.
3-week class or whatever it is.
Qualified him as an expert. They could have hired somebody that had some real credentials, real experience, has testified many times, has done experiments, has consulted all the research, and come to a conclusion. And that might have changed whether or not they prosecute Karen Reid at all.
Sure.
If you go to two or three experts and you pay them and they come back with a report that say he wasn't ran over by a car, that is something that obviously the prosecutors have to take into consideration and not move forward with. When you rely on, what I would say is a undertrained and unqualified expert.
Yeah. Not to pile on to Joseph, but this Massachusetts State Police trooper, Joseph Paul, was the one that gave his testimony. And I really felt for this guy. Yeah. He was somebody that, here's the thing.
He's just trying to do his job, man.
Exactly.
Like,
when people, he got shown. He said, "Hey, do you want to do this? You get paid a little bit more." He got trained on some software to enter in data from the information he got given from the crime scene, and then to spit out a report. That's what it kind of looked like, right? But that don't meet the standard for what is happening here. Like, he might be able to do car accidents and stuff like that, just little fender benders or something like that. But it's not what's required here, the level of training. So it was pointed out on cross. Jackson highlighted his deficiencies in understanding of physics. He was having trouble explaining basic terms like acceleration. He didn't have any kinematics training, no major sort of math degrees, no expertise in biomechanics.
Well, listen, I saw Good Will Hunting.
No, this was the opposite of Good Will Hunting. So he had to be told, it took about 15 minutes, he had to be told 3 or 4 times by the judge that he wasn't allowed to read from his report, but it was sitting in front of him. And then he basically would repeat himself 3 times at exactly 1,200. It was, and here's the thing is, most people, when they state their biggest fear, it's not death. It's public speaking.
Sure.
Right? So this is not just public speaking. He knows he's on television. He knows that he doesn't have the training. He knows there's a high-powered lawyer that's going to embarrass the hell out of him.
He knows that attorney's got all the information that he needs.
That's right. Yeah, and it's really tough
on him.
on
Move to the next thing, Chace. I want to just because I've seen you do it and I've seen you do it, Shawn. Going back to Shawn's point, when y'all have a situation like that where you just said it, they have all the money and power in the world to hire experts, and they don't present anybody. What do you do when your time is to come up when you're presenting your case or when you're presenting your closing? Yeah, I've heard both of you do it. They go, if they had it.
Sure. I mean, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to immerse myself in as much of the knowledge of that, enough to be dangerous,
right?
Enough to be able to ask them things that are so relevant and basic that someone with this expertise should have,
right?
I'm
saying even past that.
Oh yeah, past that later on, it's
if there was a person,
we're going to tell
they would have been brought up.
We're going
to
tell the jury that absolutely the criminal defendant has no burden whatsoever.
Yep.
But we put up these experts, and this is what they told you.
Right.
And the state, of Massachusetts, the prosecutor's office, they could have hired any expert they wanted to. There's, 150 biomechanics experts just in Massachusetts.
And if they could have found one to say what they wanted,
correct,
I guarantee you he'd be sitting up here today.
Correct.
And that's part of why defense. Well, you have a court-appointed attorney if you need one. You have to have at the very least somebody that can review the evidence, is trained in the law, and can present your case. But a lot of the rules are weighted towards the defendant because, like you said,
absolutely.
all right. So, it's important to catch criminals, right? It's more important for the judicial system to be viewed as fair and impartial, right?
Well,
the prosecution is a very powerful state, right?
Sure.
And so because of that, there should be very powerful protections for the defendant. If you have to equalize the playing field, and for that reason, so that they could bring it. And that's a good point. You were talking about like the experts, and if they had them, they would have brought them. I want to talk to you about something I think is a huge. First of all, should have had a different accident reconstructionist, right? Right away. They should have had a different accident reconstructionist right away. He could have confirmed that person's report, but that the person that did the original report not testify, right? Because they're not experienced in testifying. There's all kinds of ways in which it can become very, very helpful to actually have some training in answering these questions, right? Because you have somebody that's trained to answer or ask the questions in a way that makes you look silly and
sure.
stupid. So you have to understand what they're doing in order to be ready for it. But some of the pieces of evidence that I saw that I was like, I would have brought up an expert about this. Let's just talk about the taillight. Okay, so throughout this, there's a question as when was the taillight busted out? And, was it planted at the scene, right? Was it cracked when she backed up into the
vehicle
in the driveway? So I'm just going to bring up real quick, and I'll show you guys, right? This is the footage from the actual her backing up when she's leaving to go look for him, right? And she's backing up. This is allegedly where she actually hit John O'Keefe's car and cracked her taillight. Just cracked it, right? And importantly, other police officers have said that there was a crack and some pieces missing. Not that the whole thing's knocked out, right? But I would have had some sort of lighting expert to explain what happens when you have red light and you have white light. Whether or not the red light diffuses out and makes it null and void, or just diffuses the white light, right? Because the red is a very
overpowering
one spectrum, right? And it's overpowering. It's red for a reason. It's so that you can see it very, very easily, right? Because a lot has been made about what these lights look like in all these different pictures, and it's her leaving the scene. So this is, I think, her going past I think this is the library, but it's a parking lot. But what you can see is at 5:20 a.m. when she's going to look for him, you can see the vehicle, and what do you see? Only thing you see on the back really is a lot of, and it's right here in this little area here.
No way certain to tell whether or not either of the taillights are cracked.
Right.
That's correct.
And I actually even do see a little bit of, but this isn't, that's not the type of evidence you're looking for. This is how they allege the actual taillight looked when she arrived, with all that missing.
Yeah, and there's
That's not one
There's
piece
lots of
missing.
problems.
That's not it
Right.
being cracked. If I described that, I wouldn't just say that her taillight was cracked.
and the
I would say it was
testimony-
busted out.
It was busted out.
Busted out. That's
the
exactly what
testimony
I
just
said.
doesn't match the physical evidence on the light at all.
Right. And there were some other things about his actual report that caused me problems, and one of them was that, and this is something that Jackson did an expert job at doing. All right, before I do that, let me go back to this real quick. This is her leaving.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, looking at the light, I would have some sort of lighting expert explain to me how a light that now I see a little bit more white here than I did in the previous picture, but I want him to explain to me how red light affects white.
Sure.
Right. So that you can explain this stuff
Yeah.
in a reasonable way that a jury can, sink their teeth in and hang
Well,
their
that's
hat on.
that's
And
that's
there's
the
experts
problem,
out there
though.
for all this stuff.
Well, that's the problem, though, to me, is that it goes back to we do it in our cases and civil cases all the time, especially with like pre-existing. If there's a doctor out there that says what the defense is saying, then why isn't he here?
Yeah.
Like if that light that you were showing earlier is the way a light looks, even when it's busted out, why is that person not here? And I don't think that it's the lack of the prosecution to get those people. I don't think those people exist, and I think that's the problem.
That very well may be the case. But this was the part of the report that the Trooper Paul produced, and one of the things that Jackson actually pulled him up on was where he was hit and where he landed. So this is basically where he came to rest over here in this area. One of the things he couldn't explain was how his phone ended up underneath him.
Yep.
Right.
Well, I will say I thought he did a good job on Cross on that, is saying, look, this is just where the evidence was found. He didn't try to make up a story. He didn't try to make up some kind of thing, how the body twisted. He said, I don't know. I just can't. This is where I found it.
Right.
And that's the way to answer it. I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm saying, but that's how you answer that question.
See, but it also presented a different problem because he indicates where all the glass pieces were found. And one of the things Jackson pointed out was the fact that he did not really speak to the colleagues too much about an interview with them all about where they found pieces. And one of the pieces that they found was, of course, one that was located quite some ways away, right here in the fire hydrant, and right by the fire hydrant, a big piece, right? And this is indicating where he was initially supposed to have been hit. And so how a big giant glass piece ended up here by the fire hydrant, that was something that he couldn't explain in his report, and he didn't really, I don't think, do a very good job, and I'm going to try and pull up that other piece if I can, a very good job of, like what you said, one of the pieces here that they found in front of the
That's the fire
right.
hydrant.
And it's also important to note that in this particular case, right, a lot of the pieces that you're talking about were found days later. A lot of them were found hours and hours later after the vehicle was already in police custody.
Sure.
Right? And with the allegation that these things have been planted with the way in which they collected the blood, it's a tainted investigation.
Then with
a guy that's got
inverted video.
Not to mention the inverted video. The only thing that you could use to actually prove that no one messed with the tail light from the time they had custody of it in the Sally Port, right? The only thing you could use has shown definitively to have been altered.
Purposefully.
And purposefully to have been altered.
Yeah.
Before it was.
And was there any explanation of why the video is inverted?
There was an explanation in that they saw that the timestamps at the bottom were inverted, and that they tried to invert it the other way so that the timestamps would read correctly.
I think it's.
But I think
it's
that
easier
was
to
explained away.
explain that. Hey, for some reason, the timestamp is inverted on this video, not to invert the actual video.
That's the thing to say.
You would think.
So, that's all coming. All that bad evidence and stuff is coming from the chief chief investigator who has ties to the family, who might be the next primary suspect in this particular case. And he's shown a dislike for the woman. He's shown a dislike. He said he hated David Giannetti early into the case.
Sure.
Right?
And then he repeated it on stand. And
he sure did.
And not only did
And
he
he
hate
confirmed
not
it.
only did he hate him in the past,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
hates him now.
Hates him now. Yeah. And the other thing that happened, we're covering, I think, day 27 to day 29, at least midday 29. Is we saw, I think it was 27 experts, and we saw something called the voir dire process, right? And if you could, one of you, could you explain sort of what the voir dire process, when it comes to an expert, what is that process about?
It's really just a filter. We
it.
only want, both sides should really only want people that are actually experts in their field to testify. And when we say expert, what we mean is an expert is someone that has so much knowledge, education, and training that on a particular subject they can give an opinion, not just someone that knows a little bit about it.
Right.
So the voir dire process of an expert is so that both parties can ask questions of this particular expert, and they can prove to the court that they are in fact qualified as an expert on this particular subject matter or many subject matters, and therefore they are allowed at law to give their opinion to a layperson, just like Layman's Law School. We try to give our opinions
Shawn,
to the layman.
That was a great
Although we are
explanation.
not experts in a whole lot,
That's right.
but we try our best.
That's a great explanation, and I agree with everything you said. But for the viewers out there and the listeners out there, just know that this is a battle every single time with every single expert, and there's thousands of case law on that. It sounds simple. Just qualify them as an expert, but there's case law after case law. It's always a fight of who actually qualifies and who doesn't. But what you said is 100% correct. It's just a matter of getting the court to say, yes, that's right.
Sure.
Yeah, and there are different standards. Every state has their own kind
That's
of.
why I didn't even say it, because I didn't know. I didn't know there. I knew ours. But
We have Fry. We have Daubert. Daubert is
Daubert's the big
basically more stringent. So if you can pass Daubert, you can basically pass them all.
But I don't know their standard.
You have to basically be able to show that you have generally accepted practices.
Yeah.
Okay, that you used in actually coming up with your
conclusions.
and that they have been kind of peer reviewed and are generally accepted in your particular field of review. So
and the jury still weights that evidence. It's not infallible. It's not, this is an expert, you got to believe it.
Yeah.
Still, do you believe this dude or not? And
Yeah.
like we saw in the Johnny Depp trial, the expert was not so believable.
He was a little odd. And that just comes down to him having some quirks. And that's pretty normal. You'll have different people that they will and you saw it in this case, people that would testify in the language of their profession or their expertise,
Chace,
right?
You had a special one. I'm not going to give any names, but a very, very good expert, honestly, really, really good, but fell asleep on you.
Yeah, that was a problem. During the interview with a family that had a rough time, he falls asleep.
But but he knew his stuff. He just
definitely
he's not
he had
great
a long,
in front of the
he
jury.
Definitely had a long flight, I should say, right? But today, the last part of what we heard was basically the medical examiner's testimony, and as you heard about and maybe anticipated from Proctor and Buchanan's exchange on text that she couldn't decide if it was a homicide or not. It didn't necessarily help a whole lot because basically she described that he died from blunt force trauma. She said that the wounds weren't consistent with road rash, right? Now it's problematic for them. And then when she was crossed, she did not deny that the wounds or bruises on the back of his hand, those could have been defensive wounds. Absolutely, right? Didn't have any wounds on his torso. Torso. Didn't have any wounds on his knees, thighs, shoulder, none of that, right? And he had cuts on his eye, near his nose, cuts to the back of his head, and they could all be consistent with just a blunt force, like an altercation, a fight, right? She said yes, and they could be consistent with somebody falling down. In the front, falling down, hitting their face, standing up, falling down the other way. And we saw copious amounts of testimony. I thought it was way too much, and this is a practice point for attorneys out there, right? Is that you designate what you need in order to prove the point, and then you move on.
Stop.
Right? Exactly. And Lally spent so much time about Waterfall Bar. Who'd you sit next to? What did you have to drink? That's normal in that, like, you want to show how far away they were, whether that person was impaired, so their testimony can be trusted or not, whatever. Sure. That's normal, right? But the amount that he did put them to sleep. Yeah, okay, she was drunk. Did she kill the guy?
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So and we heard her voicemails, and honestly, she sounds like a pissed off girlfriend.
Yep.
Obviously, she's found something on his phone. She thinks that she's running around on it, or he's running around on her, and she's pissed. Right. But never in there. And I'll point this out. Jennifer McCabe said that she saw her about outside of that house at 12:40. Right. She connected the expert. Officer Garino testified that it shows that his Wi-Fi connected to Karen Reid's phone at 12:36, and that hurts the testimony of Jennifer McCabe, right? But she's pissed off, and she's texting him about, where are you? What are you doing? You know, we need blankets. I'm here with your kids. You're a pervert. You're out sleeping with whatever. Not a mention, not a word about, are you okay? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I mean, that's what I would be looking for. That sounds, and she's cussing. She sounds terrible. She's not quite as bad as
she
Trooper
sounds
Proctor.
like a normal woman whose boyfriend or husband didn't come home that night.
Went to a house where there's a bunch of people drinking.
Yeah.
And a bunch of younger people.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the promises that he made,
that's all that was. I got
good. Yeah, I think that he presented some of that evidence, but there was so much collateral damage done by the defense and tripping up the witnesses, in actually showing the poor character of the witnesses and the facts and circumstances of, they destroyed the phone, they got rid of the dog, all those things, the not being able to explain the injuries on the arm, all those things coming together to not even coming close.
Yeah,
absolutely not coming close.
Yeah,
well, so when we have trials, and I think probably every law firm does it, you go through what your positives and negatives are. And you also try to predict what in our situation, defense counsel, because we're plaintiff lawyers, but the other side does it too, what the other side is going to throw at you.
Yeah.
And what has happened in this case that I think was just a bad start, bad everything from the prosecution is, yes, anytime you have a problem with credibility, let's say, in our cases, we talk about that. All right, guys, we got to jump out in front of that. We got to talk about it,
acknowledge
and handle it
explain
before it happens. What happened in this case is the prosecution, that is all they did. That's all they did, is try to jump out in front of what the defense was going to say. By doing that, they lost focus in what they actually had to present.
And had to prove.
All they did was fight what they thought was going to come. But you still have to lay your case out. And they did a terrible job of just plainly laying it out in simple terms of, this is what happened, this is why you should believe it. Yes, all this other stuff took place, and there's all these relationships, but that doesn't matter. Here's what actually happened.
Sure.
Yeah, there's relationships. We have relationships everywhere. People know people. It happens. But they didn't do that. They laid it out as, let's fight the defense, and I still am waiting for them to present their case. I don't know what their case is.
Right. Yeah, and they had a duty here to basically improve intent. And when it says, like, not intending to murder the guy, but intending to do the act that actually caused it.
Which is a little strange, but yes.
Right, and so that's that's part of the second degree murder charge. And then you have the lesser included offense of manslaughter, where basically you're acting so recklessly that you act so recklessly that you cause the death of another person. You do the thing and intend to do the thing that actually causes.
And that may be why the prosecution went so far and hard on. They know they're losing. They went so far and hard on the waterfall part, trying to get, hey, she's so drunk.
9 liquor drinks.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Right.
I don't know if that's true.
But going back to how far you should go in actually presenting this. I have been absolutely flabbergasted at first of all, the amount of time that people have. Okay. And the interest.
I'm flabbergasted at the amount of time you have.
Well, I don't sleep much, Shawn. I get about 4 a night. So, but here's the thing. So I've been so impressed with what people have done, and I'm gonna see where these people live, see if we can't hire some of these folks.
Oh, they're fantastic.
Right, fantastic. So, and this is something that when we talk about what we want to see, and what's called a demonstrative exhibit, this is not something that goes out as evidence, but if you want to explain your version of the case, this is
some of the recreations have been unbelievable.
Is AZ GET Industries on believe it or not TikTok and YouTube. Okay, she's an accident reconstruction. I first saw her in the Alex Murdaugh case. She did an accident event reconstruction of everything that happened in the Murdaugh case from both perspectives. Once they were done,
she'll have the three. It's accurate as far as the size and building and all that stuff. And it's 3D where you can move through the areas. It's pretty amazing.
Right, and so I'm going to show you what that looks like. And this is something that, why does the prosecution not do something like this? And note this is on 6/4/24.
Karen stated in her interviews that after arriving at 12:24 a.m., John got out of her vehicle and was going into the home to check things out. Walking up the driveway, he approached the door nearest to the garage. After entering the home, you realize it would be impossible to walk through to the basement and not be seen. Jennifer McCabe testified that she and others were sitting at the kitchen table, and that periodically was getting up and going to the front door. Here's an illustration of what you might see from the front door if John's body was there at this time. Continuing, we approach the stairs leading to the basement. This leads to the weight room where the defense believes John O'Keefe was attacked. It's assumed that they used this door, which leads to the backyard, to remove John's body from the basement to outside, where no one upstairs would be able to see. They then would continue to the side of the house, through the gate, which leads to the side of the house with the flagpole.
That was designed to show basically what the defense has alleged has occurred and how silly it is. But at the same time, it does give you an idea of where people were, what was going on in the house, what's been alleged in the case. These are all things that are super, super helpful, in my opinion, in determining what happened there, what both sides' take is. Now, this one is a little bit further on into the trial.
Authorities believe John O'Keefe was hit by Karen Reid's car. It caused him to be thrown through the air, tumbling in such a way that when he hit the ground, he hit his head, causing serious injury. They showed some evidence of a broken taillight and some personal items of John's found at the scene. Looking at a model to illustrate the injuries, we heard in testimony that John sustained injuries to his arm, the eyes, and the back of his head. Let's look at the injuries to the arm. As a vehicle backs into John, we can see how the taillight would strike the side of his arm, breaking into sharp pieces and cutting him. Moving to this dent indicated in red, it's believed that this is where the glass John was holding hit the vehicle and shattered. Here's a photo of the prosecution's belief that this dent represents where the glass had hit the vehicle. Continuing with the prosecution's theory, John is hit and thrown into the air. When he comes back down, he strikes the back of his head, causing serious injury. This type of head injury will cause black eyes, commonly referred to as raccoon eyes. All of this seems possible, but there's a lot of missing things that don't make sense. For instance, the lack of injuries being shown here in red. You would expect to see many injuries, some on the hips, the elbows, the shoulders, and the rib cage. Especially if your ribs and arm were hit with such force that you were knocked out of your shoes and thrown 20 feet to the ground. It's also the lack of evidence on the clothing. There's no abrasions, scrapes, tears, or stains that would indicate sliding on the ground. I personally question that a glass in one's hand could cause this pattern of dents and chipped paint. After all, the hand surrounds the glass like a layer of padding, and the speed is no more than tossing a softball 12 feet into the air and letting it hit the ground. Lastly, this is presumed to have happened at 12:40 a.m. At this time, Jennifer McCabe was diligent in seeing John O'Keefe, standing at the front door and watching for him. Even seeing him, she texts him to park behind her.
So that is the kind of evidence that you would kind of want to have presented at some point. And they still may do something like that, maybe in closing if they have the opportunity. But that's still going to be very, very difficult to overcome it at this stage, because right now, you know, the defense is the only one throwing punches at this point, right? Because
and I'm pretty sure now that the prosecution has rested that there's going to be major defense punches thrown with the witnesses that they are going to call.
And to put a bow on it, it's not the movies. You don't win at closing. And they're not going to win at closing, regardless of they being the prosecution.
Sure. And
you don't win at closing.
And I always, really thought about that. Like, I'm going to be so persuasive in my closing.
I'm going to kill it, baby.
But then when I thought about it more, it's like, this jury has generally probably made up their mind after opening.
Absolutely.
And then they were just seeking for a little bit of evidence to support their position.
That's it.
And I don't think I'm going to be able to persuade any of them through this, wonderful closing argument.
Yeah.
But we do it anyways because that's what we get paid to do.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, and that's why we're so confident in this particular case. There's a lot of other facts and circumstances like the blood stains on the clothes, that are important to me.
There's so many. Yeah.
Well, I'm just, if you think about it, there's blood all going down his shirt. So how does blood fall? Blood falls down. Yep. So this is a person that was bleeding, and then it was bleeding down instead of just going out and around his body. Where's the blood stain analyst? Yep. I imagine we might see one from the defense. I don't think he's on his witness list, but still. Anyway, all you're going to see is punches thrown by the defense. They've already been throwing a bunch of haymakers. Thank y'all very much for tuning in. Like and subscribe. Let us know what you think about the Karen Reid trial and how you think it's going to come out.
And this one's not going to last forever. Give us some new ideas. We got all cases all over the world. Oh, yeah, okay. I got a few.
Yeah. There's in Tallahassee. There's a law professor that was involved in a murder for hire.
Yeah.
Where
a motive for murder.
Exactly. It was in custody right away. Anyway, we'll cover that sometime here in the future. Thank y'all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.